Well, welcome everybody to the third in our 1350 conversations. Today, we're joined by Nathan, who runs an amazing project, Reawaken Hymns. Nathan, do you want to kind of just give us which is like the overview of what you do and why you did it, why you're passionate about this sort of stuff?
Sure. Yeah. As you said, I'm Nathan Drake. I run a ministry called the Reawaken Hymns. And basically, what I do is I just take old classic hymns and I make modern arrangements and recordings of them so that they'll fit within worship at churches that do modern worship. And what kind of separates Reawaken from some of the other modern hymns is I keep the melody and the lyrics of the hymn the same as they always have been, as much as humanly possible. Occasionally I'll have to change something, but almost always the same melody and lyrics. And I do that because sometimes when people are bringing these hymns back into modern worship, they're doing so that the people who already know them can sing along to them. And if you change the melody and lyrics, that doesn't really work anymore. So that's what I do. And I have a website where there's all kinds of stuff where, like chord charts and multi-tracks and lyric videos and all that sort of thing so that churches can use these old hymns in modern worship services.
Great. So you're a church worship leader. I think I caught somewhere on the line that you were in part of like a church plant not that long ago, or have been for a little while now.
We are not currently at a church plant,
Okay.
but we did help plant a church about 6 years ago.
And did you find that a lot of this sort of making the old new, I guess is one way of looking at it, kind of helped aid maybe more seasoned Christians and sort of the newer ones coming through the doors, maybe new to church for the first time, maybe younger, maybe used to more sort of contemporary music? Did it help bridge a gap?
Yeah, it does. The church plant was interesting because it was quite young. I mean, the congregation was quite young. I was one of the older people, if that tells you anything. But we still did tons of hymns because honestly, they're just good worship songs,
Yeah.
and the younger people like them, and the older people in the church like them too. So yeah, it definitely bridges the gap, and it does so in two ways. I mean, it does so on both ends. It does like the younger people who don't necessarily know them get to learn this new awesome song with great theology, and the older worshipers who maybe do know them but are singing along to modern worship and having like a lot of songs they don't know, they get another like familiar song that they can sing right away. So that's great.
So these sort of conversations are really about two, maybe three key things. St. Peter's was a monastery in its beginning, nearly 1,350 years ago. The land was granted in the year 673 AD. The actual building was sort of built 674, so we're calling it our 1350th year. Sorry, I'm just going to mute pings going off.
That was my phone too.
Yeah, because when you're born, right, you're 0. So I'm counting this as our birthday year. And one of the things that monasteries were famous for was mission and worship. So the monastery at Wearmouth was a place of learning, was a place of living, a place of making things. Stained glass was there. But really at the heart of everything they did was worship. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think I grew up in a more charismatic kind of church. Hymns are new to me, believe it or not. And if any of my, all the congregation that know me or watching this, they'll know full well that usually I'm mouthing the words because I don't know the tune. And when you have to lead, sometimes like at funerals or weddings where nobody knows it, and then like they look to you as the only person at the front because sadly choirs are a thing of the past. What was the point? Yeah, worship. So it's being in that space, right? And I wonder. I heard you say something not long ago. I've been watching all the interviews that you've been doing in prep for this, and you said something that I really liked. It's trying to inspire people to not use hymns, right? Can you remember saying that? It's about 5 years ago.
I don't, but I'm sure I did.
Brilliant. I thought it was brilliant.
Okay.
I'll link in that video. I'll send it to you so you can remind yourself.
I'm glad I have said one brilliant thing in 5 years.
Oh,
That's more than I thought. So
more than one
that's good.
brilliant thing, more than one. But that really struck me because that was probably the mindset of the churches that I was in, was to not use them. In other words, to consciously make a decision to leave them out because they were archaic, the language wasn't understandable, or a number of things that, maybe they were just old. There was no synthesizers in them or fancy drum solos, um, and what I found actually is growing as a Christian in formation, that actually not just hymns but all the traditions of the church that span back thousands of years to 2000 years at least, to when the church was formed, all of that has a place. And I guess, what would you say is the biggest kind of selling point for making hymns part, or sorry, older songs, because all worship songs are hymns, but those older ones, what's the unique selling point of them as opposed to some of this modern stuff that people might be tempted to use?
Yeah. Yeah, I always say hymns just because people know what you're
Yeah.
talking about when you say that. But yeah, all songs are hymns. You can't have a worship song that's not a hymn. Well, you could, but then it'd be a really bad worship song. So the selling point of hymns, old hymns, is, interestingly, if you look at the scope of modern music, nothing, because there's so much good modern worship music out there that I can't in good conscience say hymns are always better at A, or hymns are always better at B, because I could find you a modern worship song that was better than that hymn in A or B, and I could probably find a hymn that was better than that modern worship song in A and B. The thing is, and I'm sorry if this triggers anybody watching in your congregation, but there is nothing inherently sacred about these old hymns. Nothing inherently sacred about these old hymns. They are not the right way to worship. Modern worship's not the wrong way, and vice versa. They're not the wrong way, and modern worship isn't the right way. And there's nothing inherently better. There's nothing inherently more holy. There's nothing inherently more righteous about these older hymns. And one of the reasons I can feel confident saying that is because when you and I, even we'll talk about different hymns because we're in different countries, but we're in very similar countries as far as church music is concerned.
Yeah.
If the hymns that we are talking about, the probably songs written in the last 1,000 years by Anglo-Saxon Christians, are the right way to worship, that would mean that most Christians for most of history have been using the wrong songs to worship, which I can tell you is not true. It's just not true. So those hymns that maybe are 1,000 years old or 500 years old, they're amazing, amazing songs. And the songs that came before them are the amazing songs. There's amazing songs happening currently. And so when I am looking at like planning worship, I'm trying not to, as you kind of said, not use hymns. I'm trying to not pay attention to when a song was written. I'm trying to pay attention to what it says, strictly just what it says. That's what I really try to do when I plan worship. And I don't deliberately say I want 2 old songs, I want 2 new songs. I just find the songs that are talking about the gospel and are showing the character of God and fit with whatever they need to fit with that week. And half of the time, half of them are hymns and half of them aren't, just by accident because of the wide scope of topics of all these generations of worshipers. But yeah, it's the biggest benefit of hymns is they just expand your worship repertoire, because there's always topics. This is going to sound strange. There's always topics that are popular, whether for 6 months like nowadays or whether for 50 years like before, but there's always things. And you'll look at the songs and you'll be like, okay, most songs from 1900 to 1920 are very focused on this thing. In America, it was the rapture. The rapture was all the rage in 1900s to 1920s. So you look at songs written then, and it's like everywhere. And like in modern worship music today, I was just talking about Jimmy Cooper on the Hey Worship channel. Like if you use all songs written today, then all of your songs are about the God fighting your battles for you. Like, yeah. And it's throughout history, this has been true just because of the world around us changes. Different like aspects of God become more important to us in certain times, and we see this like through hymnody and through time, and so you'll have different focuses in different eras of songs. And when you're not using hymns, when you're not worried about when a song is written, you just expand this wide variety of perspectives and topics and character aspects of God that are emphasized. And I think that's the biggest benefit of using hymns is it's just more great songs to use in worship.
Great. So I guess really at the heart of that is that one word, worship, isn't it? And so here it comes. Here's the key line question that I've sort of been asking everybody, and will be asking everybody, is if you had to, and you're the only one that's had any preparation time for this, so I'm expecting great things.
I should have prepared more. I
You
only
should have
looked at it
prepared more.
once now.
Yeah, study for the test.
My bad.
These pesky Anglicans are going to ask all sorts of things.
Oh,
No,
boy.
if you had to use 3 words to describe worship, what would they be? And then we'll come to why in a moment.
I did think through this one because this one was a hard question.
Mm.
There were a lot of things. I think what did I land on? I think the thing I landed on, 3 words to define worship, would be giving immense value, or giving immense worth, I should say.
Yeah, I like that. So really your 3 words kind of combine. They almost make a sentence, only they're not individual sort of
Oh,
things.
I didn't know that. Could I thought it had to be like.
I mean, no. You don't. You can. This is why. So I like doing this question because I think everyone's going to have a different take on it, aren't they? Because worship is something that is so inherently personal in a lot of ways. I always say that we have a personal faith, but not a private one. It's personal to us in whatever way, but actually we're meant to share that corporately with the body of Christ, with the church, and with those who don't know Christ, so that they may know him. So I like the fact that you come up with your own 3 that kind of make a sentence. That's really quite creative, actually. So go on then. Giving immense worth. What does that mean for you? Why did you settle on those 3?
Yeah. So I think I was just trying to define worship in general, not necessarily our Christian worship, but the word worship.
Okay.
And I think at its core, that's what worship is. It's giving something immense worth. And that can be a lot of things in our lives. We all know what it should be. It should be God, but it isn't always, unfortunately, because we love idols. And I think when I look at things like other than God that we worship, I think the 2 biggest ones that come to my head nowadays, and probably the most prominent idols in probably any culture, in most cultures like ours, are career and children, I would say. I would guess that 90% of the people listening struggle with idolizing their career or their children. I think that's probably the career part might be more in America. I don't know. You guys are much more chill about that than we are. But
depends where you live.
Yeah. But so I'm looking at these things and I'm thinking, okay, why do we worship these? What does it mean when we worship these? And it's the thing that you say, okay, this is the thing that is worthy in my life of my time and my money and my attention and my everything. This is the thing where I'm going to give that. And because we're finite beings, we only have so much of all those things to give. And you can worship more than one thing at a time, but the more things you worship, the less each one gets. And I think that's, the commandment, have no other gods before me, because God knows you're either giving him all of the attention or you're giving other things some attention as well. And so I think that's the struggle, is where do we give immense worth to that's worthy of our time and effort and money? And when we talk about worshiping God, before we get to the music, before we get to the liturgies, before we get to any of that, we have to establish, okay, this God, you were where I am giving immense worth in my life. You're where my time and attention and everything is going first. and then we get to all the other stuff like music and all that that goes into worshiping God.
Yeah. So I guess thinking about some of that, if you were, let's say you're in a certain context that is very rooted in its own tradition, and it's very, very happy there, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there is nothing wrong with being happy in your tradition. But and whatever tradition it might be, whether they're sort of stuck in the hymns and won't go more forwards, or if they're stuck too far forwards and don't want to look back for whatever reason. What would be your advice to worship leaders to? Because I think worship leader is an interesting term, because in certain churches that means the guy with the guitar or the piano, or typically it's the one who can sing, because they're the ones who are leading it, right? I can't sing, but I can play. So I was never the worship leader. I was always the one in the corner. In my context, the worship leader is me. It's the priest. It's the one who is leading the entire congregation in the worship of God, in kind of in kind of combination with the choir and the organist, or the music band, or it's sort of it's a more kind of open term, I suppose, in some traditions than it is to others, because some would be they're the pastor, they're the worship leader, they're the, and those sorts of things. Yeah, what would your advice be to them? They're in a new context, or they've been there for a while, and they want to broaden things. How would you do that sensitively?
Yeah. Boy, that is the hardest
That's
question.
the loaded question, right?
Yeah, that's the loaded question. That is always an issue. So, all right. One, make sure you yourself and your church, before you even get to like pushing the congregation one way or the other, make sure you're doing it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
Not because like, I mean, sometimes you'll go to a church and they want to start introducing modern music, and they're like, well, our church is too old. We want younger people. And I'm like, okay, but like, this is your church, so don't leave these people behind while you're trying to go to younger music. Like, so
Yeah.
again, make sure your heart's in the right place first, of course, and your reasons are going the right way. And then once you get past that and they are, and you're like, okay, we need to go forward, backwards, whatever. I think when, not if, but when you get lots of pushback about the new music in whatever direction it might be, because there will be lots of pushback. Also, there's the third most common idol, by the way, is church worship music.
Yeah.
We're not going to go there. So when you do, when you do
Stay
get pushed,
safe.
Yeah, stay safe. When you do get pushback, I would, first of all, stop and breathe, because you're going to react emotionally. But then try to get to the heart of where that pushback is coming from. Sometimes it will be straight idolatry of music. It's going to happen a lot. They're just going to like this music and not like this music, and have a hard time worshiping with this music, because to them this worship music is this important as God himself is. That's idolatry. That will happen. But in a lot of cases, it can also just be genuine, like people feeling left behind, like their own church family doesn't care about them anymore. And if you can get to like that place, then you can actually start to work things through. Like when somebody comes up to me and says like, ooh, I hate this song, I'm going to react like, I hate you, like, all combative, because it's combative. But if somebody came up to me and said, hey, I'm feeling left behind by my church family in worship, I would not be combative. I would be like, oh, we got to fix that. Like, that's not okay. So there will be pushback, a lot of pushback, and try in all scenarios to get to the heart of it. And it will probably end up being either idolatry of the music or genuine hurt that you have to address, because it's your people, So.
Yeah. I think that's one of the biggest challenges, isn't it? As it for any leader, in any way, is that you've got to be able to reach so many people. And I think when I look at the early church and I look at what we've got now, in all denominations and all spheres, the early church wasn't a service. It was a family gathering. It was a group of families that came together that ate around a table, that talked about what was going on in each other's lives, that sang those spiritual songs that we find in the New Testament. And my conversation with Jimmy kind of brought some of that out there. Um, and it was a moment of kind of everyone brought something to the table. And there were certain people that went around and were like the overseers, and they were responsible for what we might call the sacraments now. And the early bishops, as they were, had their own Eucharistic prayers and things like this that we might recognize in a modern sense as being more of a service. But I find that the way that we do church, even in like a more relaxed setting, kind of makes it like there's an audience, and then there's a stage, and there's a minister, and there's a worship team, and in some way that almost makes it harder because you're trying to then make everyone engage with what you're doing rather than engaging everybody on a personal level. And I
Yeah.
wonder whether, to some extent, as a church, we've shot ourselves in the foot the more organized we've become in any way, shape, or form, and even in the deorganization of that, or deorganizing of that. Sorry, I should say.
Yeah.
We've deorganized it, but we've still got the person at the front, and we've still got the anywhere from 20 to 200,000 in the congregation, and we've still got the lights and the staging and the whatever it may be. Or we've still got the bells and smells and the guy with the incense and all of that sort of stuff. It's trying to piece together how we collectively engage all of God's people in worship. And I think that's what I really like about what you're doing with hymns, is that it allows, at least in my mind, people to kind of those who might like the newer music or the ways that newer songs are written or the more contemporary stuff can still engage with something that's ancient and tried and tested, and those who are very much in that camp of I only want the true tried and tested, it's been around for 300 years and I've remembered it since I was 6 years old, can also bridge into something that's more contemporary. And I see it as a really, that's why I use that word bridging, I think, earlier on, is there are a number of songwriters who have took hymns and have radically changed them, and that works, but only in a certain context, right? Whereas I feel like what you're doing, and this is why I really wanted to talk to you about what you were doing, and your heart for worship, I feel like spans such a wide section. It's still going to have its place, and there's still going to be its detractors, but actually, I feel like it's a really, I don't want to use the word, but I'm going to say it. It almost feels like a good compromise, um, which is a word
Yeah.
I've learned a lot to use in ministry.
Yeah.
Because I suppose in a family there are compromises, in any family, aren't there? Not everyone's going to get to do exactly what they want to do all the time. I had a brother growing up, and we didn't always get our own way. Sometimes we had to give the other some sort of, leeway. But it's not a compromise, and it's not quite the right word. I just can't think of a better one.
I can't either.
Yeah,
That's pretty good.
we'll have to come back in a couple of months and edit in that bit. Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll do some emailing back and forth and see where we land on that.
What's a better word? That might be.
Yeah.
You're right. I mean, that's how families work, though.
Yeah.
I will say, I have to say, I wholeheartedly agree with you on the family thing, and this is something that's been like pushing onto my heart recently a lot. I feel like the switch from church as a family to church as an event is like just one of the most damaging things that has happened. And I was answering a question for somebody. They emailed me, and it was about like strobing lights in worship, and they were like, I have a medical issue. I know we won't get into the good, but we won't get into that completely. But the person was like, I have a medical issue. It causes an issue. How do I handle this? Like, it's too. And I was thinking to myself, in a church that was operating like a family, this wouldn't even be a question, because something like this would happen. Worship leader decides to try this sort of light that strobes or whatever. person with medical issue goes to family member worship leader, says, hey, I have a medical issue with this, is it okay if we don't use it? Worship leader and rest of the family are happy to oblige and help this person worship.
Yeah.
End of story. Like that shouldn't even be an issue, but it only kind of becomes an issue because that person had never met their worship leader before. So they're not going to their family and asking this, they're going to a stranger and getting in the way of that stranger's worship goals. Like, and that's gone a bad way, I think.
And do you know what? This is so true. And I had that exact same situation. I was new in post. I think it was 3 months, newly ordained as well. So like, this is the first time I've ever been let loose on like an entire congregation. I was a youth pastor beforehand. So, and it was a family service. So I had this idea of what I wanted to do, and I completely misjudged it. And I used these really kind of all modern music, and the point wasn't that I wanted people to sing in. I wanted people to reflect on the words, really, because it wasn't so much. We have this tradition in the church and some other traditions called evensong, where you go to church and the choir sings over you. And that was kind of what I was trying to go for in like a modern sense. Was like, oh, we can do this thing where the music can wash over people. And I had two really profound comments. One, Tim, there was not even one song we could sing, which I went, you know what, fair enough. Absolutely right. And that was wrong. That was wrong of me in that moment. And two, I picked, I think it was the Hillsong worship pack that I downloaded, and all of their videos are very poppy, stroby, flashing lights. And even though this was in like a brightly lit room on a Sunday morning, it still caused an issue for someone. And they came up and said, very, very lovingly, actually, Tim, have you thought about? And I went, no, I haven't. And, in that moment, like you said, right, you act emotionally, don't you? So I stomped my feet a little bit and complained to my wife and like, why don't people want this new stuff? And I went, actually, no, that's completely wrong. I need to be the pastor to these people, not they need to be the people to my pastoring. I've been called to this space by God for a reason. And I was looking through some of your, your YouTube videos that you've made for use in church. And one of the things that really impressed me was that all the backgrounds are very neutral to some degree. Like they might be moving pictures and they're beautiful and they're really nice to look at, but they're not strobing. They're not kind of flashy lights trying to grab attention. They're just really kind of interesting backgrounds, I think, in a good way, that holds people's attention, but I can't see them really being an issue for anybody. And so much of the resources you can get online now are trying to grab, at least in my mind, they're trying to grab the attention of like 15-year-olds, because the church is so panicking that we haven't got any young people in it. And at least like in my context, one of the things we haven't got is anyone in their 50s or in their 40s or in their 30s or even in their 20s. And, the flashy lights and all the rest of it, they're going to be missed on someone in their mid 40s. And actually that kind of maybe singing a hymn that they've learned in school, but in a more contemporary way that they might be more interested in now, I think is wonderful. And it's an amazing thing that you're doing and pushing and striving to achieve. And it's also, I think it's important to say that you've got quite a following. You got how many subscribers on YouTube is it now? Sort of, I've not looked at the thing, but it's quite a number, isn't it?
It's like 40,000 or so.
Yeah.
I think.
So that's a lot of people who are tuning in and looking at this and going, this is a new way to view hymns. And that must feel like quite an achievement.
It's very confusing. I'm like, God, are you sure this was right?
Well, they say know them by their fruit, right? So
yeah, it's been crazy. It's awesome. It's I'll see stuff like that and I'll be like, I don't know why I'm doing this for you, God, but if keep going, I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So
no, it's amazing, and it's actually quite refreshing because I've been in a context now for a couple of years, and my congregation know this, where I'm not. It's not necessarily my tradition, right? I've come from a more kind of, I think my church might call it happy clappy, where you wave your hands in the air and you're clapping along to the music and all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's where I love that because I can. There's sort of like when you've got like that 30-minute worship kind of set, that kind of you can just throw yourself into. Something in that for me is so freeing. And it's this total kind of abandonment of self where you kind of let yourself go and you focus on God and you're in that moment and you God is your only focus, or should be, at least in my mind, in that kind of and I haven't been in that for a while, and I've been growing in these other ways of worshiping and finding them really useful and really helpful and really really loving and amazing. um, but on Thursday night, we had our inaugural 1350 kickoff, and we had Broadmoor Baptist Church from Louisiana came to Sunderland to do mission across the whole of the city. But I had a group of 15 with me all week, and we did some really amazing stuff. And on the Thursday night, the whole choir came together. And they sang at this service, and we had one of the local primary schools come and sing too. They did some not worship songs, but they did a gospel medley, which was amazing. The kids' voices were just, it blew me away. But what I noticed was something that I have missed and maybe haven't realized I've missed was that all these young people, there was 49 of them between the ages of about 13 and 18. They gathered around the piano before the service and they were just singing. And they were singing songs that I knew, that I grew up with. And I don't know what happened, but it just filled me with this feeling. I went into the vestry to get robed up, to get ready, because this was a full-on service. I was in the full kit. You could see me from outer space. That's how bright I looked in all these robes. But I just felt this immense kind of warming, like it was. I turned around and I said to the lady who was helping us set up, I said, you know what? It's lovely to hear songs I know in church. And I think that we're always growing in appreciation for one another, right? We're always growing in love for one another and in relationship with one another. But in that moment, I realized just how how some of our older congregation members in churches that may not be so traditional must feel when we play a hymn, or what people perceive to be hymns because they're older or whatever they may be. That feeling of I know this, it resonates. And I think some of these hymns, the words, the theology in them are amazing, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's some. That's it's not that they're inherently more theologically rich than modern songs in general, but modern songs are still modern, which means they haven't been weeded down yet. Whereas the hymnody has been. Like, most of the bad stuff has fallen off and gotten rid of. So when you look at a hymnal, or a good hymnal, I should say, it's gonna be a bit more concentrated in good theology than just looking at CCLI or whatever, because all of the junk is still there. Hopefully we as Christians will do the same thing we always have, and in 50 years the junk won't be there, and all the songs that were good today will still be there, and most of the rest will be gone. And that's what happened with hymnody. So yeah, and there's so many. Oh, I got a bug. And there's so many interest. Yeah, like I said, and there's more breadth of theology too. Again, as I said, we're in an era where there's a certain few topics that are popular, and you go back and you look at these and you see these different aspects of God, and it's just like, oh yeah, we should sing about that too, or that's great too. So yeah, there's so much good, rich theology in hymns that I don't think we should leave behind.
And I found that with the prayer book too. So it's like, I grew up in a church that wasn't very liturgical. The only time we ever had liturgy was at communion. Although now I'm a priest and I look back on it, I can see where the vicar hid it. And I look at how he was very clever with the liturgy to make it, and maybe he'd be a good person to bring on to one of these 1350 talks, because he grew that church from basically nothing up to massive numbers for the UK, and but he hid it very well, to being in a church that now is very liturgically present. And what I've realized as I look through, morning and evening prayer is something that as a priest in the Anglican Church we're kind of called on to do every day as part of our own sort of spiritual formation and those sorts of things. And it's all straight biblical stuff, and it comes from such a powerful place. And if you read it and you pray it and you mean it, like there's a real kind of rich theology in there, and a real teaching in there that, for the first 20 odd years of my life, I just completely rejected because it was old. I was like, why would I want that dusty book? You know, um, and yet, so I kind of left myself in not choosing to do it, right, or to use it. Can't remember which way that went. But I'm going to tagline that in because I think it was brilliant. I limited my worship. I limited the ways that I could reach God, and that's never a good thing in my book. Um, you know, and now the breadth of worship, the breadth of style, the breadth of tradition, um, is something that's really important to me. Um,
Yeah, there's always the other side to learn from too.
mm,
Um, like as you're saying, like you're now in a very liturgical, I would say, formal liturgical
yeah,
church setting, and there's so much richness there that so many people get so bored with.
yeah,
And because when you do like a formal liturgy and you do it over and over again, we as humans have a incredible capacity to start ignoring things immediately, no matter how amazing they are.
yeah,
So you can keep that, but then you got to look at the other side that has all this new stuff and is always excited and always, you're
mm.
like, well, we need that passion with this depth of theology that we have. Like, and the problem is just when we get stuck in one way or the other and we're not willing to like learn from the other side.
That's precisely it. It's the willingness to go to the other side. And I read a book recently. Justin Welby wrote, who's the Archbishop of Canterbury. Anglicans will know that. I don't know, Nathan, if you know much about the Anglican Church. So
I know that one.
you know that one.
I know
So
that
he's
one.
was that because of the coronation?
Probably, yeah.
Probably, yeah, yeah. So he's like the like our top cleric, if that makes sense. And he's written a book recently on reconciliation, and he says it's a lot about, at least if I've read this right, there might be a Welby scholar in that who might watch this and tell me I'm wrong, which would be good because then I'd understand it better. But a lot of it is in reconciliation, seeing the other side, then the dignity in the other. And actually, I think that is something that we need more in just normal Christian life anyway. Not even when we've done something wrong or something has broken down or someone's done something wrong to us, but just in our general day to day, there's such a suspicion of the other, that is kind of it's born out of history, and yet we're still suffering with it. It's not a modern day problem. It's something that happened sort of 300-400 years ago, and now our traditions are still suspicious of one another, even though so much has happened and so much has changed. And that building into worship, I think, you're so right. It's that the bridging of so many things and the coming together of so many things and the learning of so many things together, um, and the why as well, isn't it? It's the why. If it's we want people in church to learn our traditions only because we want our traditions to continue, we've got the wrong starting point. But if it's we want people to come to church to know Christ and to have that relationship with Him and to uh, know the amazing grace that it is to be saved through His loving actions on the cross, then that's such an amazing thing that transcends all of everything, doesn't it? It makes everything else sort of seem, in my mind, sort of insignificant to that proper goal of knowing Jesus and making Him known.
Yeah, I think that's what I try to stick with, is that
Mm.
the cross is never boring. It's the one
Yeah,
thing that's never boring. Like,
yeah,
and obviously nothing else about God is boring, but it's the thing, it's our human nature to do so. But
mm.
the thing about the cross is it's offensive, and
Mm.
offensive is really hard to get boring.
Yeah,
Just look
yeah.
at Facebook. um,
Oh well, yeah,
yeah, but that's the like, and that is Christians is the crux of it. Like that's, oh my gosh, like hold on, like Jesus died for me and then he rose from the dead,
mm.
like just in our worship, if that can be the focus, if we can figure out every week to get people to actually get that in their head again, then our worship won't ever be boring, I don't think.
Brilliant. Well, I think on that point, we'll draw things to a close. I've just got one more very important question that I've been asking everyone, and I've also given you some prep time on this, so I didn't anyone else.
Okay.
Is
Good.
there's some differences between cultures, and America and England are similar, but there are some differences. So I thought this would be a good one. Is what was your favorite childhood toy?
What was my favorite childhood toy, or what still is my favorite
Oh well, if
childhood
it's
toy?
still the same, then
Is it?
great.
Oh, it's sitting back there. Hold on. Oh boy.
He's got it to hand.
Legos.
Lego. Yeah.
Lego. Yeah, that's still that's still my favorite childhood toy. Oh, I'll just drop one of my headphones. That's okay. Yeah, I was obsessed with Legos as a kid, and I still like it's like a puzzle, basically. I mean, why is it okay for adults to do a puzzle, but I can't put together Legos?
Totally. And all the new kits that come out now that well, you made Iron Man, so that's definitely more of an adult thing.
That was a birthday present from my brother, actually. From my 50-year-old brother. Legos were my favorite childhood toy and still are my favorite childhood toy.
Brilliant. Well, Nathan, it's been an absolute pleasure to talk through so many wonderful points about worship and what that means to be a worshipping Christian, what it means to be a worshipping leader, because I think all leaders should be worshipping first, to be able to lead their people in worship. You can't do it from a dry place. As much as sometimes we might have that kind of life going on, we still need to find that center, don't we? And to see all that you're doing on Reawaken Hymns, sorry, not Reawaking. I'll put a link to that in the description of the video. I'll also tag it in the introduction, and I'll do a short clip to add to this later on that sort of talks through your website and show some of the things off, because I think it's a brilliant resource for anyone who is an aspiring worship leader, or even some of our churches in the UK that we don't have musicians as readily available as we might like them to be. So any final thoughts, anything burning, anything that you think, do you know what, Christians in England need to know this?
How about congratulations, because I have never seen a building that's 1,300 years old, because I live in the US and they don't exist.
There you go.
So, well, I should say I have seen those when I went to England and Spain. But other than that, yeah, that is just insane to me. That's not a number that registers with people in the US. We're like, you're how old? Like what?
Yeah.
Like my first worship leading job was in a church that was 250 years old. And it was literally the oldest non-Roman Catholic church in my entire 2 million person city.
Wow.
For 250 years old. So I'm like, so congratulations on making it longer than my country has.
Well, I think I should just stipulate that the tower is the only surviving part, which is still original. But the site itself has been a place of nearly continual Christian worship for all that time. And at least I'm pretty sure, and looking at the building and the plans, that the actual church is where the original church was. Because it's built on the end of the tower, so it can't be far wrong, can it? But no. This is where I'm going to get somebody on Sunday tell me that I got that wrong. St. Peter's and the Monk Wearmouth Monastery, which is tied to Jarrow, so it became the Monk Wearmouth Jarrow place, was a place of real importance, and to be a custodian of that now in the modern age, and to be able to worship there as and to lead worship there is a real privilege. So thank you for your words of congratulation. I will convey that back to our team. I do, like, when I write these emails and I write it in, I do think, is anyone going to believe me when I'm looking for people? So I always send a link to the website saying, no, I'm telling the truth. It's real. It's real. Well, Nathan, thank you ever so much. It's been a real pleasure and a real privilege to have you on the 1350 Talks.
Thank you.